Hello everyone, my name is David. Today we are going to take a look at another real story with you. This story is from 2014 from Bhopal, the capital of Madhya Pradesh. In Bhopal, there lived a man named Rajesh Parmar. He got into a fight with someone and the fight escalated so much that Rajesh Parmar ended up taking the other man's life. The police then arrested Rajesh Parmar and put him in jail. He was imprisoned in 2014, and in 2016 the lower court gave its verdict. He had already spent 2 years in jail, and in 2016 the lower court's judgment came out. So, in 2016 the lower court sentenced Rajesh to life imprisonment. Rajesh then challenged the lower court's decision in the high court, but no verdict came afterward. Then came 2019. By then, Rajesh had already spent 5 years in jail. In 2019, Rajesh's father passed away, and now there was no one left at his home who could take responsibility for the household or perform the rituals for his father's last rites. So Rajesh applied for parole, and the court granted him 14 days of parole. On June 15, 2019, Rajesh's father passed away, and on June 16th, he was released from jail on parole. In the parole application, it was clearly mentioned that Rajesh had to return to jail before 5 p.m. on June 29th. After coming out of jail, Rajesh performed his father's last rites. Slowly, time began to pass, and the 14 days went by so quickly that he didn't even realize it. Finally, June 29th arrived, the day Rajesh was supposed to return to jail. On June 29th at 5 p.m., Rajesh was supposed to return to Bhopal's central jail. June 29th finally arrived, and since Rajesh also lived in Bhopal, the jail was not very far from his house. It only took about an hour to reach Bhopal Central Jail. The morning of June 29th came, but it was a very strange morning. People in the neighborhood where Rajesh lived saw flames and smoke rising from his house. The fire brigade was immediately called, and they quickly arrived at the spot, with locals also helping out. Rajesh used to live alone in that house. After a while, the fire was brought under control. Only the fire brigade team went inside the house, and by then the local police had also arrived. Inside, they found a completely burned body. Since Rajesh was the only one living in that house, the neighbors assumed it was his body. But the problem was that the face was unrecognizable, and there was no clear evidence to confirm whether it was really Rajesh. Still, because no one else lived there except Rajesh, everyone believed it had to be him. But even the police had doubts about whether the body was truly Rajesh's or someone else's. When the police arrived, they began their investigation. The fire had broken out in only one room of the house. The rest of the house was completely intact. In the room next to the one that had caught fire, they found a suicide note. In it was written, "I can't stay in jail any longer. This life is too difficult. I don't want it. I had no will to live even before, and now my father is also gone. I don't know if in the future I will ever be able to come out on parole again. I don't want to live this life without my parents. I have no relatives. My parents are no longer alive. And how am I supposed to live this life now? My life has become meaningless, and that's why I want to die. No one should be held responsible for my death." When the police found this suicide note, it was concluded that the person who had died was Rajesh. The handwriting in the suicide note was compared with Rajesh's own writing that the police had, statements he had written himself, or anything handwritten by him from the house. The handwriting expert also confirmed that, yes, it was indeed Rajesh's handwriting in which the suicide note was written. And when the local police found the suicide note, they sent word to the Bhopal Central Jail that Rajesh had died and had committed suicide. They also reported that the body of the man had been found along with the suicide note written by him. The Central Jail authorities had been waiting for Rajesh to return to jail before 5 p.m. that day. But before that, some police officers arrived and informed them about the incident. Rajesh was a prisoner, and now he was dead. Whether it was suicide or something else, he had died. In such situations, the law says that if a prisoner dies, or if anyone facing a case dies during the proceedings, the case is closed. So the Central Jail authorities decided to close the case. Meanwhile, the police were also working on closing it, but at the same time they were gathering further evidence because the matter seemed very simple. A suicide note had been found, and the police had sent the body for a post-mortem. 2 days later, the post-mortem report arrived. When the report reached the local police officer in charge and he read it, he was completely shocked, and then he told all this to his senior officer and to all the police at the station. The post-mortem report said that the actual cause of death was strangulation, death due to the throat being choked. It should have said the person died from the burns, but instead it said the real cause of death was strangulation, and that the body had been burned afterwards. The police had one big question. The person who died was the same one who had written the suicide note and whose handwriting matched the note. So why did the post-mortem show that he had not died from the fire but had been strangled by someone? Why would someone kill him, take his life? He had been in jail for 5 years and when he was released, so why would anyone go after his life? The police had no answer to that question and needed to find one. They asked the doctor again whether there might have been a mistake in the post-mortem report, but the doctor said no, there was no error. The actual cause of death was clearly written as strangulation on the post-mortem. And now this case reached the senior officer, who said that all the photographs of the crime scene had been taken. By this time, the body was no longer present, as the last rites had already been performed after the post-mortem. The senior officer said that this was a very serious and highly confusing case. On the surface, it appeared to be a suicide, but the post-mortem showed that someone had killed him. It was a murder. Therefore, the case needed to be investigated very carefully and in great depth. He instructed that all the photographs taken at the crime scene should be collected and brought in for review. All the photographs were brought to the senior officer. He examined each picture very carefully, but one photo caught his eye. In that picture, he noticed that the victim's legs were stuck together, tightly pressed against each other, and that was very strange. Normally, if someone commits suicide or dies a painful death by fire, the person thrashes about. When a body is burning, people usually move their arms and legs, so the limbs don't end up glued together. But in that photo, both legs were stuck together as if someone had bound them. Although there was no rope, yet the legs remained fused. This struck the senior officer as very odd. Another thing that puzzled the police was that when a fire spreads, you can't control how it burns. It can engulf the whole body and the house. But in this case, only the face and the body above the waist were burned. The body below the waist was not burned. The police wondered what kind of fire would burn Rajesh only above the waist. His face was severely burned, yet the body below his waist was unburned. That struck them as very strange. Fire is hard to control and can spread anywhere, so the fact that only the upper half of the body was burned made the police suspect something was wrong. They believed the post-mortem report was accurate. This looked like a murder. The police then investigated Rajesh's background but found nothing that raised suspicion. They went to the central jail to ask about his behavior and learned he had behaved well and got along with others. They decided to pull his phone records. After he was released, he had obtained a phone number that showed activity only in Bhopal and nowhere else, and on June 29th, that number was switched off. At that point, the police had no concrete evidence they could use to figure out what had happened. The police looked at his call records from before June 29th and checked who he had called after he got out of jail. They found that he hadn't made many calls, but there was one number he called repeatedly. He didn't talk to that person a lot, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, but compared to others, he spoke with this contact a bit more. The police decided to investigate who this person was, so they pulled the full call details for that number. When they traced the number, they found the owner's name was Nihal. Investigators learned that Nihal had once lived as a tenant in Rajesh's house, but had moved away a few months earlier. By tracking Nihal's phone location, they discovered he was in Gujarat, so the police went there. They located and detained Nihal where he was working and asked him if he used to talk to Rajesh on the phone. Nihal said yes, he spoke with Rajesh because he had lived in Rajesh's house, and after Rajesh was released on parole, he was very upset, so he would call Nihal. Nihal said that Rajesh would call him every day and keep saying only this, that he didn't want to go back to jail. Life in jail is awful. It isn't a life like the one we live outside, so he didn't want to return. The police grew suspicious and questioned Nihal firmly, then brought him back to Bhopal. Once in custody, Nihal told the whole truth to the police. He said that when Rajesh first came out, he was okay, but as the dates of June 25th and 26th approached with only a few days left before he had to go back, he became extremely distressed. Rajesh told Nihal, "I don't want to go back to jail because after that I may never get out on parole again. Even if the High Court or Supreme Court upholds the sentence and I'm given life imprisonment, my whole life will be spent in jail." Rajesh asked Nihal for an idea. Nihal then gave him this idea. If you die in the eyes of the law, you won't have to go back to jail and your case will be closed. But for that, in the eyes of the law, it must genuinely appear that you are dead. When Nihal said that, Rajesh panicked and said he didn't want to get involved in a murder case, but Nihal managed to convince him. Night of June 28th came. Rajesh had to return to jail on June 29th. On June 28th, Rajesh and Nihal left the city and wandered around Bhopal looking for a person whose weight and height would match Rajesh's. While roaming, they reached a petrol pump and found a man who looked exactly like Rajesh. His name was Raju. He was from Bihar and had come there for work. When they saw the young man, Rajesh and Nihal decided he was the one who could help them. Rajesh Parmar and Nihal tried to befriend Raju and kept talking to him. They told Raju that they were now friends and wanted to celebrate their friendship, so they took him to their home. There, they drank a lot of alcohol. Nihal and Rajesh deliberately gave Raju a lot of alcohol, and when he became extremely drunk, Rajesh strangled him to death. That night, they stayed there, and by the morning of June 29th, before 5 a.m., they placed the body inside a room. They piled many books on top, and using petrol they had brought, set everything on fire. They intentionally burned the face more than the rest of the body, so it would be impossible to identify the victim. After setting the fire, they left the house and escaped. Nihal then told the police the whole story. The police were left wondering where Rajesh was, but when they asked Nihal, he said he had no idea where Rajesh had gone. He only said that Rajesh would head towards South India and would not stay there. Even after repeated questioning, Nihal insisted he didn't know Rajesh's whereabouts, and the police came to believe that he was truly unaware of where Rajesh had gone. Nihal told the police that he didn't know where Rajesh was, but Rajesh had told him that after their plan was executed, neither of them would meet again, they would go their separate ways. Nihal also said that Rajesh had kept an old SIM card and had mentioned that one day he would call from that phone. The police asked Nihal if he had received any calls, and Nihal said no, not yet. The police decided to wait, thinking that when Rajesh called Nihal, they would get a lead. The wait was long, but one day while Nihal was in police custody, he suddenly received a call. When he answered, it was Rajesh on the line. Rajesh had no idea that Nihal was with the police. He asked Nihal if everything was okay and whether he had been caught. Nihal reassured him that no one suspected anything. Rajesh then said he wouldn't get caught and wouldn't go back to jail. Nihal asked where he was, and Rajesh replied that he was in Chennai. Nihal said, "Okay, you're in Chennai. Let me know if you need anything. I have a lot of friends there." Rajesh replied, "Yes, that's fine. If I need anything, I'll tell you." Then the call ended. After learning Rajesh was in Chennai, the police quickly went to Chennai to look for him. Later, Nihal received another call from Rajesh. Rajesh said he needed help and asked if Nihal's friends could assist him. Nihal agreed and said his friends would meet Rajesh at a specified time and place. He gave Rajesh the time and location and told him to be there. Then police went to that spot in Chennai. The officers disguised themselves to blend in with the locals, dressing like local residents, and waited there. At the appointed time, Rajesh arrived, and the police team, who were already in position, immediately identified him and brought him back to Bhopal. When the police brought him in and asked him about it, he said that he had spent 5 years in jail and had absolutely hated life there. He said that he had never had the will to live. He was released on parole, but then he realized that he had no relatives whose events, like weddings, could allow him to stay out of jail. He felt he couldn't spend his whole life in jail, so the only way he saw to avoid going back was to make the police believe he was dead, and that's why he had planned the entire conspiracy. Because of his desire to avoid jail, Rajesh made a grave mistake. He already had a murder charge against him, and now, in order to save himself, he deceived the police, escaped their notice, and committed another murder. He had already been sentenced to life imprisonment and could no longer come out on parole. From now on, whatever life he had left would be spent entirely in jail. So this was today's story. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. We hope you enjoyed the content and found it valuable.